In this module, we will discuss leadership and team building. By the end of this module, you will be able to define leadership and followership, explain leadership and followership aspects of CRM, describe the characteristics of capable leaders and effective followers, explain the 5 steps of assertiveness, explain how the trans-cockpit authority gradient fits in the concept of CRM, and describe the characteristics of a high-performance team. Success or failure of a team is always dependent on the quality of the leadership. As Napoleon once said, there are no bad regiments, only bad colonels. There are many ways to define leadership. Some definitions are philosophical in nature, while others are either inspirational or pragmatic. Leadership can be defined as a process of social influence, which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. Leadership is not something you are born with. It is actually a skill that can be taught and learned, and this is recognized by the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO. The International Civil Aviation Organization states that leadership training is essential for all crew members, since even junior employees may be called to perform leadership duties at different times. ICAO defines leadership in the context of influence, but goes further by specifying that the leader should recognize the desires of the crew, set an example, and use persuasion to create an understanding of the goals that need to be met. In addition to formal education, a person can hone their leadership skills through a personal commitment to self-improvement. Leadership is both an art and a science. It is also highly situational. Nelson Mandela was the first black president of South Africa. In his book A Long Walk to Freedom, Mandela stated that a leader is like a shepherd. He stays behind the flock, letting the most nimble go out ahead, whereupon the others follow, not realizing that all along they are being directed from behind. This philosophy worked well to change an apartheid society, but how well do you think it would work in the aircraft if the captain took this attitude? One of the core principles of leadership is that you can delegate authority but never responsibility. A capable leader will embrace that philosophy, understanding that if something goes wrong, the leader did it, and if something goes right, the team did it. The captain's position is vested with authority, since that authority is a key element of flight safety. This authority sets the stage for the proper use of influence, but does not guarantee it. One key factor is that you need to know how to delegate authority, because it's simply not possible for the captain to get involved with all tasks. For example, during a turnaround, the captain cannot possibly monitor passenger unloading and loading, review the new flight plan, weather reports and NOTAMs, pre-flight the flight management system, inspect the exterior of the aircraft, study the airport diagram and charts, check that the fuel loading was done correctly, take care of any maintenance issues, and perform the numerous other duties that are part of the turnaround. The only way all these tasks can be accomplished efficiently and correctly is to delegate to others the authority to get those tasks done. These tasks are delegated to other team members including the first officer, flight attendants, ground crew, gate agents, etc. Even though the authority to perform a task has been delegated, it is extremely important to understand that the captain is still responsible for the proper accomplishment of the delegated tasks. Of course, the captain should ensure that the individuals who have been assigned tasks are capable of performing the tasks in the first place. The captain is responsible for the well-being of crew and passengers, customer satisfaction, efficient use of the aircraft and fuel, and of course, the safety of the flight. All parties involved in a flight, including the passengers, view the captain as the ultimate authority, so the captain needs to take responsibility for anything that goes wrong. For example, if a passenger complains about something a flight attendant did, the captain should take responsibility for what happened and not try to deflect blame back to the flight attendant. Most people have heard of the saying, "First impression is the last impression." The captain can set the stage for excellent performance of the flight during the first few minutes when a crew gets together for the first time. At that point, the crew is lacking a sense of mutual accountability, and they are only relying on the knowledge that the other people have been trained in their assigned tasks. The captain's job is to start the team building process. An effective team building technique is to create a climate of mutual respect amongst the crew. The captain can do that by introducing himself or herself to the crew. A sincere desire to meet someone can be expressed by a firm handshake and positive eye contact. Another effective technique is to ask each crew member how they are doing and ask about their background. People generally like to talk about themselves, so this sets the stage for respect and trust in the captain. However, the captain must be genuinely interested in the response, so paying attention to the person is a must. The captain must make a genuine effort to remember each crew member's name and make the person feel valued. The captain should make a statement which solicits and respects input from crew members during the initial meeting. One of the most important tasks after the initial meeting is for the captain to perform a CRM briefing. During this briefing, the captain sets the tone for the flight, asserts his or her authority, and opens the lines of communication for all subsequent activities. This briefing should cover all items that are general to the flight or series of flights that the crew is paired to fly. The captain can set the proper tone by projecting enthusiasm for the flight, stating that the flight will be run in strict accordance with standard operating procedures, and encouraging participation in the decision-making process by inviting the crew to provide input when warranted. The last point can be introduced when the captain states that he or she also makes mistakes. For example, the captain can state, "I follow standard operating procedures, so if you see that we are deviating from the procedures without prior notification, bring it to my attention immediately." Unfortunately, it is not uncommon for crew members, especially the cabin crew, to change several times during a flight. This practice makes it hard for the captain to initiate a new team-building process each time there is a change in the crew. However, the captain needs to do his or her best to conduct a CRM briefing with the replacements. Team building is a continuous process, and it needs to be done throughout the whole trip. The continuous team building process involves making each crew member feel valued by thanking and praising them for the quality of the work, soliciting inputs from other crew members when a major decision needs to be made, respecting inputs from other crew members, and redirecting any praise that comes to the captain to the crew member who truly deserves the praise. Another team-building technique is to use the word "we" instead of "I" when the captain is addressing the crew. Of course, there is always the problem of friction between crew members or between passengers and crew. There is no default formula that can be used to handle these types of situations. You can try using humor, but you need to be tactful so as to avoid offending anyone. Once again, this continuous team-building process is interrupted by frequent crew changes, which means additional work for the captain, as he or she has to start all over again. Remember to do your best in these situations. A leader should always set the example. To lead by example means to guide others through your actions instead of your words. The intention is to inspire others to copy your behavior. The captain should be an enthusiastic role model who motivates his or her crew to do their best at accomplishing the mission objectives. The captain should acknowledge and accept responsibility for mistakes, make sure they are fixed quickly, and move on with the mission. The most difficult part of leadership is communicating. General George S. Patton once said, "Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what to do and they will surprise you with their ingenuity." Part of communicating is to make sure that you clearly state what you want people to do. Do not assume that your vision of the what will be clearly understood. Obviously, before assigning a task to a crew member, the captain must confirm that the crew member has the ability to perform the task in the first place. There are two more elements to communicating. The first one is that the captain needs to know when to listen and when to speak. The captain should always actively listen to what a crew member is saying and be careful not to filter or block their message. The captain also needs to be open to criticism regarding his or her performance. When receiving a critique, the captain should focus on what is being said, not on who is saying it. Unfortunately, in today's airline industry, a lot of flight attendants do not view themselves as working directly for the captain, even though they really are. The captain needs to be fair and honest and reprimand a crew member when necessary, however, and this is really important, to always do so in private. On the other hand, a captain should praise a crew member in public for an exemplary performance. It is understandable that everyone is in a hurry to go home after a trip, but a good captain will take the time to inform flight operations management when a crew member has performed particularly well. A key aspect of leadership is knowing how to distribute and manage workload effectively. In the airline industry, this particular task is addressed by standard operating procedures, or SOPs. However, some standard operating procedures do not specify who should perform the associated list of tasks. In these cases, the captain must step in to establish who will perform each of the associated tasks. The captain is responsible for managing the performance of the crew. As mentioned earlier, good performance should be praised, in public if possible. However, you do not want to compliment to excess because that would lead to a devaluation of the compliments. When giving a crew member a compliment, it is important to address the specific behavior and its importance. The captain should address inadequate performance on the part of a crew member. This should always be done in private, and the criticism should be done as soon as possible, tactfully and honestly. An effective leader will not avoid commenting on inadequate performance in order to avoid interpersonal conflicts or damaging someone's feelings. Keep in mind that your tone of voice can make a difference on how well a critique is received. Authority with participation basically means that the crew is encouraged to participate in the decision-making process. The captain still remains the final authority, but including the other crew members will create a more effective team. If the first officer is exercising authority, he should encourage the flight attendants to participate, for example, when making the decision to start boarding the aircraft when the captain is not on the aircraft. The captain should start exerting authority with participation after the initial CRM briefing. For example, the captain should request input from the crew about specific decisions that must be made regarding the flight. Authority with participation can also be accomplished during the pre-flight. For example, the captain could ask the first officer for input about the planned route, cruise altitude, weather, NOTAMs, and maintenance issues. Another way to encourage participation is to ask the crew if anyone has any questions. The desire for input from other crew members needs to be genuine on the part of the captain. Do not under any circumstance ask for input, but then obviously ignore what is being said. If the captain makes a decision that is contrary to any input that was received, the captain should explain the reasoning behind the decision. And more important, the captain should thank the crew member for their input and encourage them to voice their opinion in the future. A failure to do so destroys the team-building process. Great teams are not just made up of great leaders. They are also made up of great followers. An effective follower shows respect for other crew members, is dependable, strives for self-improvement, and has a sense of ownership. Showing respect to other crew members is fundamental to fostering a sense of shared purpose. Just like the leader, a good follower shows respect by actively listening to others. One way to show respect is offer to help with a task without being asked for the help, especially if the task is undesirable. You learned earlier that a leader should always praise in public but criticize in private. The same is true regarding disagreements. Disagreements should always be a private discussion between the two people disagreeing. There is nothing more corrosive than a crew member disagreeing with the captain in front of the other crew members or passengers. Airlines use standard operating procedures as the backbone of safe operations. These SOPs include a list of tasks which are typically assigned to specific crew members. Standard operating procedures only work if they are carried out diligently. Crew members need to be dependable because a safe operation depends on these tasks being carried out. Aviators are professionals, and professional people should constantly strive to improve themselves. You should never settle for good enough, because the minute you do so, you start sliding backwards, and your performance will suffer in the long run. First officers are captains in training, so this point is particularly important to them. One way to improve your performance is to seek feedback when required. You are missing a golden opportunity when you fail to ask for that feedback. The person who is providing the feedback should address the strengths as well as weaknesses of the person receiving the feedback. Keep in mind that focusing only on the weaknesses can demoralize those on the receiving end of the feedback. Good followers own the outcome of the mission, as if they were in charge. For example, a crew member spots some trash on the jetway and picks it up. This is partly a matter of pride, as well as the realization that each action we take impacts the bottom line of an operation. Note: it can be very challenging to promote a sense of ownership in people who are underpaid or who perceive that they are underappreciated. Investigations have determined that numerous aviation accidents could have been avoided if only one person had spoken up. As you saw earlier in this course, the accident in Islamabad was due to the captain making his own FMS approach, with no objection from the first officer. That accident could have been avoided if the first officer had spoken up. How can someone allow such a chain of events to occur without saying anything? In the case of the Islamabad accident, the captain had basically shut off all communications with the first officer, but that did not relieve the first officer of the responsibility to intervene. When flight safety is under threat, it is the duty of crew members to be assertive and voice their concerns and opinions. Assertiveness is not just a flight deck concept. It applies with equal force to flight attendants, ramp agents, mechanics, gate service agents, and dispatchers. The reason is very simple. If you are on board an aircraft that is operated in an unsafe manner, your life is on the line as well, and hopefully that will be enough motivation to assert yourself. Since assertiveness applies to all team members, everyone should be taught to be assertive and voice safety concerns. Inputs must be provided honestly and frequently by everyone, even when not requested by the captain. Obviously, you have to use good judgment when doing so, because you do not want to raise safety issues when none exist. Being assertive does not mean that you need to be disrespectful. If you do so, the captain will quickly tune you out and ignore you regardless of what you say or what is going on. How you exercise assertiveness is really a matter of experience, but the industry has adopted a 5-step assertiveness process. This process is particularly useful in cases where the captain is not listening to the crew or is acting like an absolute ruler. The 5-step assertiveness process is as follows: get the captain's undivided attention. State your concern. State the problem and consequences. Provide solutions. And ask for feedback and come to an agreement. Insist on each of these steps, no matter how intimidated you might be. The Trans-Cockpit Authority Gradient defines the level of communication that a pair of crew members can achieve. The captain's ability to promote assertive behavior in another crew members is directly affected by the perceived authority that lies between the captain and that crew member. The gradient is steep when a domineering captain is paired with an unassertive first officer. The gradient is non-existent when the captain and first officer have approximately the same experience. The gradient is reversed when the first officer is the functional leader of the flight. None of the previous gradients are conducive to a safe operation. A crew pair can be unsafe if the captain is the domineering type and the first officer is not assertive. In these types of situations, the first officer may be fearful of the captain's wrath or intimidated by condescending comments, and this results in minimal inputs by the first officer. This is really problematic in emergency situations, during which a captain depends on the first officer's inputs. The equal experience pairing is actually the most dangerous because there is no clear delineation of the authority of each crew member. A clear indicator of this type of gradient is when you hear comments such as "I thought you did the walk-around" or "I thought you got the weather briefing." A reverse gradient occurs when the first officer becomes the functional leader of a flight. This happens when the captain is relatively inexperienced and the first officer is very experienced. Unfortunately, this type of situation has been the cause of accidents in the past, with the most notorious being the collision between a DC-9 that was taxiing and a B-727 that was taking off. This type of gradient is unsafe. The captain must be the designated and functional leader of a flight. Game theory is the study of how and why people and organizations make decisions. These decisions are based on valuing likely outcomes. Game theory can be applied to commercial aviation. In aviation, crew members are playing to produce safe and efficient outcomes. Achieving this goal requires decision-making, good team communication, situational awareness, and safety culture. Most of the tasks and operations involved in a flight are team-based. One person cannot be responsible for the safe outcome of all tasks. On the other hand, unsafe outcomes can happen if one person is not contributing to the team effort. Everything you have learned so far in this module contributes to the creation of a high-performance team. The characteristics of a high-performance team include clear goals that are specific, measurable, accountable, reasonable, and timely. A positive atmosphere. Defined roles and responsibilities, also, mutual trust, which means crew members trust each other and the team as a whole. Coordinative relationships that enables team members to seamlessly coordinate their tasks. Valued diversity, which includes experience, viewpoints, and backgrounds. Open and clear communication. participative leadership that involves and engages all team members, and effective decision-making, which is based on rational and intuitive thinking. Even if all these elements are present, there is always the possibility of conflicts between the team members. This could lead to a breakdown of the team. These conflicts should be addressed openly and transparently,